Alright, how's it going? Thanks for coming in. We do have a 3-part series today spanning from Plague City to Underground Pass. I changed the narrative up slightly from the last story. Let me know what you think and what you prefer. But without further ado, let's get into it. My name is not important, but this is a tale of lies, of kings, and of evil. Plague City, rescuing Elena. One day, while traveling through Ardoin, I noticed a large wall separating a part of the city. A nearby guard tells me this area is off limits. The citizens on the other side of the wall have all been stricken by a plague, and this is a quarantine zone. On a whim, I decided to trespass through the surrounding neighborhood, walking through a man's backyard, and this man beckons me over and looks in distress. After asking him what's wrong, he then tells me that he is worried about his daughter, Elena. Apparently, she has gone into this quarantine area, wanting to aid the ill. Of course, I agree to help, and Edmund tells me to speak with his wife, Elrina. After doing some various tasks for Elrina, I acquire a gas mask, and coming back to Edmund, he explains his plan is to infiltrate the quarantine zone. He believes it's best to dig a hole underneath the wall. I soften parts of the soil next to the wall with water, and proceed to dig. And falling underground with Edmund shortly behind me, I find a blocked off pipe. On said pipe, there is a grate blocking anyone from squeezing through. Edmund and I tie a rope to this grate, and with both of our combined strength, pull it off. Edmund waits behind as I squeeze through. Finding myself now inside the other part of the city, I approach a man named Jethic. I ask this man if he has seen Elena, and Jethic says to check the Renson house, and gives me a book that he had borrowed from them. Heading north, I find their home and enter. A lady named Millie explains that Elena may have been kidnapped. After leaving their home and exploring the west side of Ardoin, I see black X's on some of the doors in the city, and attempting to open one of these doors, I find it's being guarded by a mourner. And if you don't know, a mourner is just a group of people, typically a collection of elves and humans, who have joined the Prifundus Death Guard. Well, one of these mourners explains that this area has been hit hard by the plague. Telling them about a kidnapped girl doesn't seem to pique their interest. This mourner explains that I need permission from a man named Bravik to enter the house. Heading back to the town square, I find a large building on the north side. While approaching this building, I call out to a clerk that I see on the other side of the window, telling him that there is urgent business involving a kidnapped girl. The clerk then lets me in, allowing me to speak with Bravik. But at this point in time, Bravik is very hungover. I explain my situation regardless, and Bravik gives me a scratchy note. This note is merely a recipe for a hangover beverage. After making the drink, I hand it to Bravik, telling him that the mourner are not listening. He then gives me a warrant to enter the plague house in search of Elena, and even with note in hand, the mourners still do not wish me to enter. However, they do seem very confused, and this confusion gives me a chance to sneak inside. I search a few barrels around the house, finding a small key hidden inside one of them. Noticing a staircase nearby, I sneak down that as well. At the bottom of the staircase, there's a locked door. I stick the key into the keyhole and start unlocking the door when I hear a whimper of sorts. I continue turning the key, and as soon as there's a click, a woman rushes out in tears. She explains to me that her name is Elena and she's been trapped here, so I return her to her father Edmund, finishing this part of the tale. And that will take us into story number 2, Biohazard. With the Plague City on my mind, curiosity is getting to me. I wish to know more about what's really going on in this quarantine zone. My first thought is of Elena. Seemingly, her only goal was to simply aid the infected on the other side of the wall. Why was she locked in a basement? I visit Elena in her home, wishing to understand more about the plague. She explains that she is skilled in biology, her objective being to run some tests and figure out what is causing this plague. And unfortunately, she has lost her distillator and would like it back. She directs us to her friend Jericho, who keeps communication with the west side of Ardoin via his pigeons. Jericho is then found in his home, north of the chapel. Upon speaking with Jericho, he allows us access to his bird feed. Now, I begin searching for a better access point to the western part of the city when I find a man named Omar. He explains that him and his assistant, who is on the opposite side of the wall, can help me cross over the top. However, it is too risky as the watchtower guards are too close to the wall and need to be distracted. With bird feed in hand, I throw it around the fence on the guard post's opposite side. This causes a flock of pigeons to distract the other guards. Omar acts quickly, throwing a rope over the side of the wall that allows us to safely climb up and over. I now find myself back inside this plagued city. To find out more about what's really happened in this part of town, I venture off towards the Mourner headquarters. I already know from previous experiences with these people, they are on some serious lockdown. I find their lunch being prepared in the form of soup in a large cauldron. With the thought of poisoning these mourners in mind, I find a rotten apple and throw it into their cauldron. I then attempt to go inside the building with the now poisoned mourners, but I am denied access because they are awaiting a doctor. With a devious plot in mind, I find the local nurse's home and steal her medical gown. Impersonating a medical professional, I head back to the Mourner HQ and fool the inhabitants. Once inside the headquarters, a lone mourner is found upstairs, with my only option left, murder. Upon killing him, I obtain a key, which is used to gain access to the caged room nearby. In one of the crates, a distillator is found. Further observation finds it to be Elena's. I hurriedly return to her home. Returning this object, Elena has a plan and needs us to meet with a chemist in Remington. She hands us liquid honey, Athenia, sulfuric bromine, and a plague sample. I head to the chemist in Remington. Once there, he explains that I need to get these items to Gaidor, a friend of Elena, who may shed some light on my plague sample. The chemist then hands us an item called touch paper and states that the Varrock guards are looking out for someone carrying suspicious materials and recommends us using his 3 errand runners to smuggle these items into Varrock. I meet with his smugglers and give Athena to Da Vinci. The liquid honey is given to Chansey, and lastly, the sulfuric bromine is handed to Hops. I must now meet them in Varrock. To ease the minds of the guards, I disguise myself as a priest and proceed to the fenced-in enclosure in the southeastern side of Varrock. I am searched by a guard. Him finding nothing of suspicion lets me pass. At this point in time, my only item is the plague sample, in which he finds no interest in. With the plague sample in hand, I head to the Dancing Donkey Inn. Here I meet back up with Hops, Da Vinci, and Chansey. They hand us the respected items back. A successful smuggle indeed. I find Gaidor at his house in the southeastern corner in Varrock's gated area. After explaining my mission with Elena, I give him the sample, along with the Athenia, liquid honey, and sulfuric bromine. Gaidor comes to the conclusion that this plague is a lie. I return back to Ardoin and speak with Elena, letting her know about Gaidor's results, that the plague is fraud. She suggests that the plague is a hoax and I should speak to the person on top of this, East Ardoin's king, Lothus. Confronting the king, he replies that he did it for his people's best interest, protecting them from a greater danger. King Lothus then explains that the king of West Ardoin is his brother, named Tyrus. Tyrus had gone on a journey and has been corrupted by a Dark Lord. After drinking from the Chalice of Eternity, which is why the wall has been erected between the cities to protect East Ardoin and all of RuneScape. With Plague City and Biohazard out of the way, it is time for the longest tale of this trio, Underground Pass. While speaking with King Lothus, he mentions the only way to reach the Western Lands is through the Underground Pass. Not only that, but cultists have moved into these tunnels. I am warned that this will be a dangerous trek, with many obstacles in the way. Not only these obstacles, but also the self-proclaimed son of Zamorak, Iben. Happily finding in my journey that the guards now let me through the gate to the western city. Walking west, I come across a cave with a man named Koftik, who gives me more information about the Underground Pass. It is unlike other caves, being possessed of a corrupting darkness that breaks the will of man. He informs me I should bring 2 ropes, a bow, some arrows, a spade, a bucket, a tinderbox, and a plank. After obtaining these items, Koftik continues with a story about a strong adventurer named Randus. Upon this man's travel in the cave, he had apparently heard the voices of Zamorak himself. This voice had explained to Rondis the methods required in achieving his greatest goals. This is the last anyone has ever heard of him. Koftik wishes to meet me next to the bridge that's further inside the cave. Venturing through the cave opening, I am presented with 3 paths. Choosing the northernmost path, I continue further into the cave. Maneuvering around a swamp-like terrain with large rocks blocking my path, I find Koftik standing next to a fire with a stone tablet on the ground. Out of pure curiosity, I pick up this tablet and read its tale. All those who thirst for knowledge, bow down to the Lord. All you that crave eternal light, come and meet my God. For no man nor beast can cast a spell against the wake of eternal hell. This tablet appears to praise Ivan, or at least aims to scare adventurers from going through this cavern. Koftik tells us that it looks like there have been others in this cave already, and hands us an excerpt of the fabled adventure gone mad. Randus, it reads, "It began as a whisper in my ears. Dismissing the sound as the whistling of the wind, I steeled myself against these forces and continued on my way. But the whispers became moans, at once fearsome and enticing, like the call of some beautiful siren. Join us. My greatness lies within you, but only Zamorak can unlock my potential." Putting this excerpt aside, Koftik then hands me an oily cloth, explaining that this may be of assistance in gaining access to the rest of the cave. Continuing on the path, I am faced with a subterranean river, and I can see where a guide rope is holding up a bridge. I return to the fire, wrap one of my arrows with the oily cloth, and set it ablaze. Coming back to this bridge, I fire an arrow at the rope, causing the bridge to drop. While crossing, I had east coming up to a pit with a rope swing, throwing my rope to the ceiling above this dark pit, and having the rope magically wind and tie itself off. I gain all of the courage and faith that I can muster, and put it towards my next steps. I run towards the abyss. Unfortunately, I miss the rope, falling into the rocky pit, taking damage to my health and to my sanity. I follow a small path, stumbling over rocks until I come across a muddy rock pile. I climb up and find myself back at the beginning of the underground pass. I make my way through the cavern and back to this pit. Looking around, my rope is nowhere to be found. Luckily, I have brought a second. Throwing this rope in the same manner, I attempt to jump once again. Running towards the edge, I jump. And I feel the rope around my hands. With a firm grip and using the momentum I have gained, I fling myself to the other side. Following the path, I once again see Koftik, standing in front of what appears to be a large room with a grid-like tile floor and a metal gate on the other side. Although, this time there seems to be something off with Koftik. It almost seems as though someone is impersonating him, living in his skin. Perhaps the voices of the cavern are overcoming him. I shake the feeling off, and Koftik explains I must pick my own path next. The grid seems to be a large puzzle, in which I must use trial and error to find my path across. If I am to step on the wrong floor tile, I will be dropped into a pit. Indeed, this did take much trial and error, and after much anguish, I finally found the correct path for myself, allowing me to cross to the other side. I now pull a lever next to a metal gate. Opening it, I head west to a narrow corridor with 5 strange markings on the wall. It appears as though these are spiked traps that I must successfully disarm so they do not trigger and I may pass through this corridor unscathed. Instead, I gather my energy and sprint through each of these traps, being continuously stabbed as I run through the corridor. With a large chunk of health missing, I am at the end of the corridor with time well saved. Continuing further into this dungeon, I find a room with multiple pathways and an altar next to a large, sinister-looking well. Alongside this well is an old, tattered journal. Upon further inspection, it appears to be the journal of Rondis, the forgotten adventurer. It reads, "We came across to cleanse this underground path of the dark forces that dwell here. We knew the journey would be treacherous, but even I was not prepared for the darkness that fills this place. To hold the darkness at bay, I had the mages create some spears of light for us. I have positioned them in the tunnels around where we have made camp. These spears are imbued with the holy light of Saradomin himself. They will give us faith and the courage we need. And yet, I still feel the relentless tugging at my weak soul." Putting the journal away, I decide to venture off onto one of the pathways. Picking the very north passage first, I see a few traps on the ground. Having brought the plank, I lay it down onto the traps and safely cross over. At the end of this northern pathway, there on the ground before me, lays an orb. This must be one of the orbs in which Randus was talking about. I pick it up. Heading back to the main room, I now go down the northwestern passageway. Hearing the sounds of large footsteps and hissing noises, I run blindly through a multitude of spiders and ogres, finding another orb at the end of this trail. After picking it up, I once again make my way back to the main room. Now, I decide to travel down the middle pathway, navigating through similar traps as the north passageway, and I find yet another orb of light. Out of confusion, I backtrack through the main room, and back towards the way I came. This time, I do however spot a furnace a short ways off of the path. I find it necessary to destroy the orbs and throw them into the furnace one at a time. With orbs destroyed, I noticed I may now pass through this strange well. Jumping in the well, I begin descending to another level of this labyrinth. Landing gracefully on the ground, I head down a western path and find myself in an area with a few cages containing humans. These humans appear to be slaves, which are guarded by goblins. I go through and pick the lock to each of these cells and am met with a mostly gibberish type of speech that I can't quite make out. It's either that or someone who is wanting to cook me into a soup. In one of these cells, I find a rather odd-looking patch of ground. Using my spade, I dig directly on this patch and find a hidden tunnel. Taking me to the other side, I'm faced with a narrow ledge that I cautiously make my way through, coming up to a maze of raised beams. Luckily for me, I have over 50 thieving, so I may skip this puzzle. Heading south to a gate, picking the gate's lock, I head through. Now once met again with Koftik. At this point, it is clear that Koftik has been corrupted by the voices. Upon confronting him with his statement, he denies and claims that he is fine. After a brief conversation with the now insane Koftik, I find a nearby pipe and squeeze through. On the other side, I am faced with skeletons and a unicorn in a cage. Something primal awakens inside of me, wanting to kill this unicorn. I grab a loose piece of the cage railing and head to the path above. Using the loose railing, I pry a large boulder out of its spot and send it hurtling down towards the unicorn, effectively crushing the unicorn. I then retrieve its horn. A job well done. Proceeding through this tunnel, I head north, eventually coming across a group of paladins. Their names go by Sir Carl, Sir Jero, and Sir Harry, who have made sort of a camp, themselves having been tasked by King Lothus with the same exact mission as I, but they have been unable to open the locked door of Ivan. Upon speaking with them, they graciously give me a prayer potion and an attack potion, suggesting I leave and let them finish their task. Unfortunately for them, I am somewhat of a murderer myself. In wanting their paladin badge, I slaughter the trio. With badges in hand, I head west, eventually finding yet another well. Its inscription saying that the doors of Iban will not open as long as there is a beating, good heart present, and the well demands the offering of such a creature's remains, along with 3 crests of the blessed. Thinking my murderous rampage from earlier, the death of the unicorn and the 3 paladins did not come in vain. I used the unicorn horn and the paladin badges on the well, opening a large door with a ram skull on it nearby. Venturing through this large door, Koftik yet again appears in front of me, declaring this place to be his home and Ivan to be his friend. He mentions something about foolish dwarves that have taken up residence to the south and resist Ivan. He then tells me to slay them in the Lord's name, just like I did with the paladins. He must be wrong. Ivan didn't influence me, did he? Ignoring this thought, I push on. Now, in a large open cavern, there are rocky sides surrounding the perimeter that I may freely walk on, along with walkways shooting over a dark abyss. It seems as though it is a maze, and if I am to fall off of one of these walkways, I surely will fall to my death. There appears to be some type of temple in the middle, along with a small house on a stretch of land over this large pit. I bravely exit the perimeter onto a narrow walkway. Attempting to find my way, I must jump over many gaps in the floor. And unfortunately for me, one particular jump I miss and fall to my death. Waking up, I appear to have fallen off the pathway in the sky and am now in a large grounded area. Unsure of how I'm not dead yet, I push forward. Finding a small camp, I now discover the dwarves Koftik had mentioned earlier. Upon speaking with these dwarves, their names are learned to be Nyluth, Clank, and Cayman. Nyluth, happy to see someone who is seemingly not under Ivan's control, tells me that they are a group of miners who are unaware of the evil Ivan. Unfortunately, Ivan has corrupted the only exit in the western lands, the Wells of Voyage. Instead, he uses this to dispose of his victims. I suggest killing Ivan, to which Nyluth replies to seek out Ivan's only confidant and guide, Cardia, the witch, who lives in the house on the platform above. Clank then explains the dwarves are the only ones not corrupted by Ivan's voice. All humans have become soulless slaves of his, or possibly of Zamorak himself. Those who resist are locked in cages until they are broken. Clank then hands me a pair of sturdy gauntlets to protect me from the zombie's bite. Finally, Cayman offers me either a brew or to sell me some stews and meat pies. Not having any interest in them, I decline. Finding a staircase, I climb back up to the top portion of this cave, the area with the walkways. I pick a path and follow it, going northeast until I reach the first path. I attempt to jump the gap and fall once again. Returning to Cayman, I now buy one of his meat pies to restore some of my health. After many helpless tries and much money given to Cayman, I find myself at the witch's front door. Upon politely knocking on this door, I run around the corner, waiting for the witch to answer. The door opens, and a cat flies out of the house. The witch quickly runs behind, attempting to catch the cat. I take this opportunity, walking inside the house and searching around some of the chests in the room. I find a stat restore potion, and a super attack potion, along with a doll of Ivan, and the history of Ivan. Leaving this house and finding a good spot to hide, we read the history of Ivan and learn how to rid the earth of this evil being. Venturing through the cave, attempting to complete the steps needed to kill Ivan once and for all, I come across a tomb that looks as though it may be Ivan's. Returning to the dwarves yet again to gain their opinion on this, Nyloof talks about the doll and of the witch, confirming that I need to reverse Cardia's ritual and throw the doll into the well of the damned. Finally, accepting Cayman's brew, I bring it to Ivan's tomb, dumping the brew over the large coffin and use a tinderbox to set it ablaze. Once completely burned, I now have Ivan's ashes and use them on the doll. Heading north from the tomb, I come across a large spider named Calrog, and upon his defeat, I soak his blood into Ivan's doll. Next, I need Ivan's shadow. To obtain this, I need to kill 3 demons: Dominion, Othenian, and Holtheon. Jumping around the paths north of the witch's house, I come across these beasts. Each demon slain drops an amulet, and upon obtaining all 3 amulets, I head to a nearby chest and use these amulets to open it. This gives me Ivan's shadow, in which of course I use on the doll. Currently, I've obtained Ivan's body via the doll, Ivan's blood from the spider, and now a shadow from the demons. The last thing needed is a soul. After an hour of jumping across platforms, failing, and spending more money at Cayman's homemade shop, I finally come across a platform with a dove in a cage. Putting on the gauntlet given by Clank, I search the cage, finding the skeletal remains of Ivan's dove. Smearing the bones on Ivan's doll, the ritual is nearly complete. Making my way to the large temple, I find a disciple of Ivan. Upon confronting this disciple, a small battle ensues, and after killing this man, I don his robes. Entering the temple, Ivan himself is found sitting on a throne. Recognizing the doll, he states he cannot die, and that I am Zamorak's slave regardless. Ivan begins his attack. I then throw the doll into the well of the damned. Soon after, Ivan is taken by darkness and utterly destroyed. The temple starts to collapse, and I drop into a cavern below. Landing on the ground next to me, I find Ivan's staff. I pick it up with the intent of using the staff for years to come until I can obtain 87 Slayer. Making my way through the cave, I once again meet with Koftik, who now is thankfully sane again and seems to suffer from memory loss. Informing him of the events that had happened, he leads us back to the entrance of the pass. I then return to the King of Ardoin, telling him of the adventure. He thanks me, exclaiming that he will send his mages into the underground pass to clear the well so I may next stop his brother, Tyrus. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you stayed to the end, why not consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already? And why not check out my Twitch while you're at it, right? We'd love to have you there. But I will be continuing with this questline eventually. The forthcoming videos will be boss guides and some boss lore. I'm really going to try and get out a couple of videos a week. We'll see how things go from here and adjust if needed. If you really made it this far, let me know in the comments what your favorite quest is, regardless of spacebarring through it or not. I'm stuck between Desert Treasure 2's lore and Dragon Slayer 1's combat. I really enjoyed the boss fight on that quest for some reason. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.